hope you enjoyed the opening music. I always enjoy jamming out to it. Thank you for tuning in. I already see people here. Someone said hi from Bogota. I feel like I pronounced that wrong, but from Colombia. Um, Someone said types. Am I right? Someone said hello, everyone. Really excited. So if you're new to this Twitch stream, this is a weekly Twitch stream that I do, brought to you by GitHub, called Open Source Friday, where I talk to open source maintainers about their various projects, and we learn how we can contribute and get involved as well. Or if we're looking to eventually become maintainers ourselves, this is great inspiration. Today we have our guest, David. I hope I didn't even ask how you say your last name. I'm gonna assume it's Blast, but you can.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay,
that's
cool.
right. Sometimes people make it cooler. They'll go with like Blast or like some kind of other. It really is not. It's not that great of a name by itself. So I wouldn't mind if you amended it. But
I think it's cool. It's a cool name. But feel free to introduce yourself. Tell us like what you do, what you're about, what makes you excited.
yeah. So my name's David. I think TypeScript has been something that I've been a big enthusiast of for a very long time. Like a lot of the community, it's been really nice to see. Over the last well, I guess it's been about 10 years now that TypeScript's been around, but to sort of see that kind of migration towards it becoming a niche thing, towards becoming sort of the standard for the way that a lot of web apps and libraries are built now. So that's been really exciting. I think it's great for developer experience. And as I sort of delved into TypeScript and what it's capable of, I really found this like whole world of things that previously we didn't really think were possible, that can be done just using TypeScript's type system. It's really powerful, and if you work with it the right way, it can be really fast too. So it's been really exciting to be exploring some of that, and that's kind of directly what led to Arktype, which is the project I'm going to be talking about today.
Awesome. So excited. First off, I didn't even realize it's been 10 years since TypeScript came out.
Yeah,
Like in my head, I'm like, oh, JavaScript came out 20 years ago, but no, it's
yeah,
almost like almost 30, I guess.
yeah.
So you talked about like this passion for TypeScript, and you kind of mentioned the name Archetype. What is that?
Yeah. So it actually arose when I was building another project that had to do with automated UI testing. It's another open source project. It's called Redo. But as I think I've tended to do, you're building one tool, then you're like, I should make an abstraction to make this tool easier to build, and then you get like 10 levels of abstractions up. And you're like, what I really want is to just like build this entire new validation system. And, I need to like be able to write things that look just like TypeScript types that work at runtime. So that was kind of the initial inspiration for it. Was if you look at like most existing validation libraries, you have to learn like a chaining syntax or some kind of like unique set of APIs to be able to represent even like basic types that we all are sort of familiar with writing the syntax for in TypeScript. You have name as a string and age as an optional number or whatever. You have one model for doing that in TypeScript and a separate model for doing it in validators. Um, but I was trying to sort of like think from first principles about if I were just going to design, a validator from the ground up to just behave as close to TypeScript as possible, like what would it actually look like? How could I actually represent these types in a way that we can still use them to do validation at runtime, but then they maintain that kind of, consistency with TypeScript. You can use them in your IDE to give you autocomplete and type errors and all of those benefits as well. So that was kind of the initial motivation for it. And I have been working on it for about a year and a half. So it's definitely been something that I've like really, really poured a lot of iteration cycles into. And at this point, I'm really, really excited. I think it's a really, pretty polished validation library that I'm excited to share with people. And I'm at that phase now where we're really starting to get a lot of external feedback, and we're definitely interested in more of that. So sharing it with the community, exactly what I'm here to do and exactly what I want to be doing.
That is awesome to hear about the inspiration behind it and what exactly it does. It's kind of funny that you said like you started working on one project and then you're like, you know
Yeah.
what, this I also need this. I'm
Yes.
gonna also highlight some comments. I like to make sure people feel involved. So some people are tuning in from Morocco and Peru and Mumbai. Also we got someone that said TypeScript is something I'm really excited about, especially after your other streams. And then Okay, I don't fully understand this joke, so maybe you could explain it to me. But they said, Zod, am I a joke to you? I have not used Zod, so I don't.
Yeah, so Zod is like the biggest validation library out there right now, or at least sort of
Oh,
the like best practice. You see it in most places. If you're looking at like TypeScript tooling and the best kind of like inference for a TypeScript validator. So it kind of is based on that like chaining syntax strategy that I was describing, where you'd say like Zod dot string dot optional, etc. So I think it's very powerful and the inference works quite well. But it is a very different approach. I think one of the really cool things about Arktype is so there's like this whole generation of validators like JOI and Yup and Zod, and they especially Zod is definitely the best of those in my opinion.
yeah.
They work very well, and I think that they're very reliable and familiar to people. And you know, I get asked a lot about like comparisons and how they differ and things like that. But one of the cool things is like it is a validation library. But it does actually not have very much foundationally in common with Zod. The biggest difference being like it's a parsed syntax. So it actually looks like TypeScript. It comes from strings and objects and kind of like simple structures. It's not like based on function chaining, which has some really cool benefits, like making it portable and serializable. And you know, the kind of like long-term vision for all this stuff is something like Arktype could actually be like a cross-language validation definition syntax because it's not based on JavaScript functions, because it's just like a simple, you know, parsed syntax that could be easily stored in JSON. You could actually have the same definition be used from, you know, your TypeScript server and your JavaScript front end and your Python server and your, you know, I don't know, maybe you wrote a server in Rust or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's what all the cool kids are doing now. So you could use it anywhere. So that's like one of those really cool aspects of it where you know, it's kind of like less bound to a particular ecosystem. But that said, it is like very rooted in TypeScript, right? So like all of the type syntax and everything is meant to be familiar to TypeScript developers. So it'll be really interesting to kind of, yeah, again, hear some more of their thoughts about what they think.
Gotcha. Thank you for that clarity. Even thank you for the joke. I know they said just kidding. I love to see more libraries in this space because I have had people come on here and I seen like they wrote code that had Zod or they someone mentioned Zod in the comments and I've been like not sure what that is. But so
Yeah.
glad that you you explained that to me and I'm sure it helped other people who are in the comments as well. Okay, so talking about not knowing things or not understanding things, my question to you is for folks that don't know, can you explain, and you got into it a little bit, but can you explain what makes it so challenging to reuse TypeScript definitions at runtime?
Yeah. So definitely, I think that the reason that there's so many solutions in this problem space is because it's genuinely a really difficult problem to solve, and it's a problem that's pervasive because almost every developer working in the JavaScript TypeScript ecosystem, or at least I guess technically, if you're not doing any validation, then you're fine. But if you're working with types and you want to validate things and have type safe definitions, then this is a big problem. So I think there's some like GitHub issue somewhere where it's like TypeScript should have runtime validation. Here's like 50 libraries that have been built to try to fix this problem. Like, you know, maybe TypeScript should just do it or something like that. I think TypeScript has been pretty adamant that their sort of goal is to build this compiled language that creates JavaScript. So it seems unlikely that that will ever happen. But basically, it's a really common problem. You know, I have a type that's user with a name and an age. That's what I use to tell me, you know, what my input of my function is. How do I reuse the same type to make sure that when someone submits a form, you know, representing, you know, when they create a user, for example, they sign up for an account. How do I like reuse those same definitions without duplicating the logic? Because the last thing that you want to do is have duplicated code when it comes to your data validation. That's almost like probably the most sensitive part of your app is, you know, is the data coming in and out of my app of the proper shape that I expect? If it's not, you're probably going to crash. So you don't want that to happen, and you don't want to have to maintain the definitions in two places. The problem is that TypeScript is a compiled syntax, and it, you know, creates JavaScript, which is actually what runs in the browser. And there's no way to like go back and access the types at that point. They're kind of just gone. So it's a big challenge. Basically, you have to come up with some way to write something in in syntax that's native to JavaScript and available to JavaScript, but that infers a type that you can still use within TypeScript in your IDE as a function parameter, as the type of your data that comes out of a validator. So that's the main challenge. And yeah, it's been something that we've definitely struggled with for a long time. There's other sort of approaches like, these kind of like extra compilation steps where maybe they'll try to convert your TypeScript types to be something that's available at runtime. Arktype doesn't do that by default. It's sort of meant to be, you can just get up and running with it right away, and it will. It doesn't require any plugins or any kind of like extra compiler steps. So it just kind of takes advantage of this very unique property where it has a full TypeScript syntax parser written identically between TypeScript generic types and like runtime code at JavaScript. So we'll get into that a little bit when we like look at some of the demos probably, but you'll sort of see that at runtime and then statically within your IDE, you get the exact same result when you define a validator about whether or not what you wrote is valid, and you get autocomplete, and it's actually a pretty full, rich experience.
Awesome. That made so much sense of like where the challenges lie. Before we move into the demo, I seen someone, maybe you know them, I'm not sure. They said, "Woo, David, drummer 1025." I don't know.
Yeah.
Or they're a fan. Awesome.
It's actually like a Twitch viewer of mine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I actually do stream occasionally from Twitch. That's Arktype.io, and it's been a little while, but maybe you guys could motivate me to get back into streaming, because I do miss it quite a lot. So I should start streaming some of my TypeScript code more regularly if you guys want to see some crazy types.
I bet they do. Is that did I get it right?
Yes, yeah, that's
Awesome.
right.
Okay, cool. Let's quickly go in, not quickly, but let's go into the demo because now I'm dying to see it. I'm gonna go ahead and share the screen that you have.
Great. Okay. So yeah, you can kind of see here. Well, this is our GitHub repo. This is Arktype.io Arktype here, and it's kind of got this built-in little demo and everything. And there's some kind of basic getting started steps here. This is just a landing page that we go to that has a little bit richer of a docs experience. And I've been questioning whether or not this is actually like, I'm not a UX person, and like I'm terrible at it. I have very bad intuitions. I tried to like build a website, but who knows? It's supposed to be the idea that like, okay, so you've got this like automatic demo thing going on here, but you can like take control of it by pressing this button. But I don't know
I
really how
didn't
visible.
realize
Yeah,
that.
see, it's because I'm a bad UX designer, but
No,
that's
but
okay.
it's so. I thought it was so pretty. I just didn't know I could do that. I'm gonna click it.
Yeah, I think it's pretty unintuitive, but I'll work on it, or just maybe I can find someone else who's better at UX than me. But basically, this just brings up like a cute little like UI. This is using StackBlitz, and it just kind of replicates an environment where you can see how Arktype works. Again, this is like not any special plugins or something. So this is identical to what would happen in VS Code or whatever if you just install Arktype and start using it. But basically the neat part and the like little addition to it that makes it a little bit clearer is this kind of definition and output. So you can see here, this definition is based on like what we've written here. And then we see what the output was, which is based on trying to actually validate whatever data we passed in. And then there's an error here that we'll get into it a little bit. But you can kind of see a little bit about what this type syntax looks like. We'll start actually even a little bit more basic than this. So we'll just go with something called my.
Could I pause you? We have someone that asked if you can zoom in a little bit. I know sometimes people watch on their phone. Sorry that to interrupt you.
Yeah. Hopefully
that's good enough. It's pretty big on my side.
Okay. Yeah.
Keep
Hopefully
going.
that's good.
Sorry
I think
about
that's about as big as I can get it without
messing everything up.
making
Yeah.
the screen. Okay. So anyway, basically you can see that if I start typing here, so for example, I'm like typing, okay, I want to create a type. It starts with S maybe. And so there's this nice autocomplete feature where you can see all the keywords that start with S. So maybe I want a string. And so the really nice thing is you can even see in this like function signature helper, again, it's not based on anything unique. It's just using TypeScript's type system. But you can see that basically your input definition is string as a string, and then your output is the actual type string. So it'll validate whether something's a string for you or not. And then, from there, you can get into like any kind of sort of arbitrarily complex TypeScript expressions. So maybe I want like a string or a number. So now it's a string or number, and you can see the type was inferred as string or number. Maybe I want a string or a number array. That works. Or maybe I want an array of strings or numbers. And so you can have like arbitrary parentheses, anything works. And you can see that all the TypeScript is basically inferred one-to-one. So I could like mouse over this, and it would say it's a type of string or number array. And if I pass something into this, it's going to validate that it is an array and that every element of the array is a string or it's a number. So this will be familiar to like people who have used validation libraries before. Not this part of it, but the part of it where basically what it does is that it will then take this type that you've defined based on TypeScript syntax, and it will give you back a result either including valid data based on a type or some error message describing what kinds of problems there were that prevented the data from being valid. Awesome. So yeah, it's really fun to see. Definitely just like messing around even a little bit like this, and just kind of seeing like as you type, you get these really nice error messages. If there's ever like a syntax mistake, like, oh, missing expected, I didn't finish my like token or whatever, you could say, there's all sorts of runtime specific expressions. Maybe I said like Boolean is less than 5 by accident. I probably meant number, but so that works okay. But if I made a mistake and typed something like this, it actually has this whole like semantic validation as well, which StackBlitz maybe isn't doing the optimal job of actually, re-rendering the type error there. But you can see like it actually knows that a Boolean isn't something you can compare to a number. So it's got this whole like built-in syntax checker and all this semantic checks. So I think a lot of developers see strings and they sort of have this impulse of like, oh, strings are not type safe. Like this is a magic string. Yeah. I would venture to say that like the input you get when you're typing in like an Arktype definition is oftentimes like richer than the input you get when you're typing in TypeScript like natively in your IDE. There's a lot of cases we check for that TypeScript itself doesn't even necessarily catch. So it's like very deep, the sort of like level of validation that occurs when you're creating types. So with some of that like out of the way, it might make a little bit more sense what we're looking at here. Yeah. So we're defining, unfortunately, I wanted to define package because like, open source packages, it makes sense.
I love it.
Trying to do that. But package is like technically a reserved keyword in JavaScript or something, even though they never used it. So it gets mad at you. It's weird. I don't really, I think it was like something from like 10 years ago that they thought about adding to the language and then didn't, or something like that. I don't know. Anyways, it still gets mad at you if you try to use it. So I just shortened it a little bit for that reason. But basically, this is a type. So this obviously I added a couple of extras in here, but essentially, in addition to like the base TypeScript types where like all the keywords like string and number and object and unknown or things like that, those all work. But we added this like runtime specific syntax. So, by default, like things like maybe instead of having a name or whatever, I have an email. And like, again, as soon as you start typing, E or whatever, you'll see that that's like an available keyword in this scope. So there's a lot of like built-ins like that are really useful. In this case, semver is another built-in that verifies a proper version number. Wow. And then there's kind of this like rich syntax for defining, bounds. So this would typically be either like a number. You can define either like a min or a max or both. Or for a string, it's like the number of characters in the string. So maybe it's a string less than I don't know how much tweets are now. Is it still 160 or something? I don't know.
I think 280. No, I don't know.
I don't know. Whatever. Twitter's got that somewhere. So less than 280 or whatever number it is. And then you can also do it with arrays. So like in this case, what this means is that we have a type package where the name is a string. The version is a proper semver string. So it's like, 1.0.1 or whatever. And then contributors is optional. And it's a, I think this was just sort of for the purpose of demonstration. You probably wouldn't use this exact type, but it is a list of emails that is greater than 1 and is less than or equal to 10. So then if I look at how it's inferred at TypeScript, these like runtime specific constraints like semver or email or bounds that say like has to be greater than 1 and less than 10 go away, and you just see the part that you care about in your IDE, which is that name is a string, version is a string, and contributors is an optional array of strings. So there's that like really nice one-to-one when you're defining definitions that correlate directly with TypeScript, and then when you're defining things that are outside the scope of TypeScript, it'll just happily infer whatever the most specific TypeScript type is that would correlate with that, that idea. So again, for semver, it's string. I'm sure you could try to build some crazy template literal thing that like did something like semver, but I don't think that would be very helpful. So for the most part, types like that are going to just be a string. And then, like I said, for the array, you'll just get the base version of it. But then when you actually run it at runtime, you'll see that it will do those checks. So now this whole thing kind of makes a little bit more sense, where you can see the definition that was defined here, and you see that the output says problems, contributors must be more than 1 items long, and it was 1. Well, that's from this data. So we passed in the data name, Arktype, version 1.0.0-alpha, and contributors was just me. So we do have some other contributors, and we definitely encourage you to add your name to that list. Later in the stream, we can go over some of that, but I'll add one of the other contributors. So if I add this in, you can see now that the data is correctly output here and that this is valid. And if I did something like this, you get a different error message. In this case, the first item of contributors must be a valid email, and it was Sean at Arktype, but that's actually not a valid email because it doesn't have a domain suffix. So you get these like really nice detailed error messages for everything that could go wrong, which is
and it even told you what position in the array that it was error. Am I?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
So if you have like multiple errors, you'd get multiple, or I guess in this case, it's just telling me what the first one was. But basically, like if you have multiple errors at different paths, then I don't know. Say if I like, so say if I like change this to be 5 instead of a name for some reason, you get like this really nice summary of all of the errors. So name must be a string, and contributor 0 must be a valid email. So yeah, I think it ends up being a really good experience to work with.
That's so amazing. Yeah, that would make. I feel like it would change the game, or it is changing the game of writing TypeScript, debugging when you have an issue and all that. This is awesome. And wait, just to make sure, the semver, like the semantic version one, that's built into Arktype? Like, did I?
Yeah. So it's built in. So we have there's like all the default TypeScript types, and then there's this like set of runtime specific keywords that we added. So it's common things like email. This really should be muted, but common runtime types like email, credit card, UUID, semver, all those kinds of things we just build in by default. And then it's also very easy to define those types using custom validators, narrow down string. So you can define string literals and everything. Like pretty much any kind of like TypeScript syntax is a sort of a one-to-one. So if I wanted to say that the name had to be like specifically Arktype, I could define it as a string literal like this. And then if I were to change it here, you can see name must be Arktype and was Arktype or whatever that is. And then if you actually look at the type of the package, then it gets narrowed down to be Arktype specifically. So again, it's like really very carefully tested to be this like one-to-one with TypeScript, where you'll always get back exactly what you put in. And you get these like really detailed type errors if you ever make a typo or anything like that. I think you could, again, do some kind of like template literal thing if you're talking about for a semver and say like, whatever, string dot something. This is really complex rules, and I actually don't even know how that would be exactly represented. So I'll just let you add that. You could always cast things if you want to. We'll see if it adds some like autocomplete here for this. If I say like, okay, great, but actually, I want to infer it as like string, or maybe we'll even say like, if we think that semver should be like number, dot number or something, probably another number. So you can actually cast things like this, basically telling it like use this at validation, but then when you actually infer the type, I want it to look like this. And then if you actually check the type, it'll do that for you. So if that's what you're into, then feel free to like add on whatever types you want. But the default inference should, for the most part, be pretty good.
This is such an exciting project. Oh my gosh. Do you mind if I like look through some of the comments or questions that people
Yeah,
have.
no, definitely. And if anyone has a suggestion or question about like a type you'd like me to represent here, there's quite a lot that I haven't done yet that you might, have familiar patterns from other validators that you want to see what it looks like in this kind of syntax. I'd be happy to try any of that stuff.
Yes. Somebody, okay, this is more a question for me that I can quickly answer. Someone was trying to reach the page for Arktype. I just lost it because I scrolled too fast. And just a reminder to folks, I think they were spelling it wrong. I have the link down below as you can see it. It's Arktype, like ARK type.io if you want to go ahead and check it out. And then someone else asked what editor you're using. I believe you're using StackBlitz, and that's on the Arktype website. So if y'all wanted to follow along with David as he's doing this demo, you can literally do the same thing and edit the StackBlitz editor that's embedded onto his site. Somebody else said, "How does this work?" I'm guessing this is some type of massive template literal type. Mind blown.
Yeah, actually, it works using a shift reduce parser. So it's like a real parser implementation, which maybe I can,
Yeah.
you guys can still see this here. Let me just make sure that this is minimized so that it's not, hopefully my background doesn't bother anyone. I like to like have animals in the background while I code.
Pretty.
So yeah. Anyways, basically you can get like a general idea from if we look at, for example, string parsing and we look at operators, yeah. So this is like one of the nice examples I like to show people when they're like interested in how it actually works. So you see what's here is a function that at runtime has like a state that represents the state of a string that's being parsed. So it might have certain branches and certain groups and things like that it's encountered, and it has characters left to scan. And this is the same function essentially written as a generic type. And it has this state that's represented within TypeScript's type system. So basically you can see this like really clear parallel between what's happening at runtime and then what's happening within TypeScript's type system. So you can actually use template literals and you could do this like pattern matching. But I went through a lot of iteration cycles on trying to get this to work in a performant way. And it turns out that like TypeScript's handling of template literal pattern matching is actually not very performant. So if anyone's trying to write a parser for types, I would not recommend just like checking, if it's, don't check for like, string, like pipe character string, if you want to see if something's a union. It actually, what you want to do is like iterate one character at a time. And like whenever you reach the end of an expression, you sort of like update a state. That's a lot more efficient. So one cool thing that I can kind of show real quick is we do like have performance testing, and we've built these like custom tools that will test the performance of our runtime code and our types in parallel. So this like is a measure of the number of instantiations created when you define like a particular type. And these types are based on just generating a bunch of cyclic types in a scope. So you can kind of see what this definition looks like. Unfortunately, I didn't actually show what a scope was or how it looked in the original demo. But basically, scopes are sets of types where they can reference each other. So you can see here that like I'm referencing user3, and user3 is defined here to be something else. And they can be recursive and cyclic, and everything will be perfectly inferred. So for example, like if I start actually interacting with this, you can see here's all the types in there. And then, so if I infer it, you can see that I have these properties on it. And, okay, so the first member or whatever, then that has these properties. It's just some randomly generated nonsense type. But the point is that, so say that you have like one of these crazy cyclic scopes that's based on 100 different types that are all referencing each other. This is what it looks like to actually interact with. Like it's actually instantaneous. There's no delay, even if it's parsing this like massive type with all these like cyclic recursive references. It's actually, we refined it a lot, and we found that this strategy works really, really well. I think a lot of people are used to like TypeScript types doing crazy things, but like you have to worry about them like crashing the TypeScript server and not being very efficient. But we've actually tested this up to 500 recursive cyclic types. I think this one, you can start to notice a little bit that there's like a little bit of lag, but it's still really fast, especially after you initially, get started with the inference or whatever, and then that stuff is cached. It's very usable. So yeah, I feel like that's one of the really exciting aspects of it, is you'd think that there'd be this trade-off of like, if I like scale up and add complexity, this strategy isn't going to scale. But actually this like scope system is super powerful. It, does scale to like incredibly large scopes that are still sort of immediately inferred and give this really, instant feedback for everything you type still. And even cooler, I mean, there's this whole rabbit hole, but basically scopes actually, just like scopes in code, they can actually import one another or extend one another.
What?
So it's like really this whole module system where I could like define, I could define a scope and say, for example, okay, so I'm going to call it types, and I'll say, okay, we have like A is a string and B is, I don't know, some key is a Boolean or whatever. So this is a scope. Then you compile it like this. And so if I mouse over it, I immediately see it's like this space where A is a string and B is some key. And I can use it just like the other types. I can say like A, and then I can validate, pass in some data, and it'll give me a check result based on a string. But yeah, it's really kind of this like mind-blowing thing where actually, if I wanted to then say like, I'm going to define a different scope, and let's say that I want to define C as being, having a key A that references a type A, and B will be, let's say, like an array of Bs. Well, right now it's going to tell me like this stuff doesn't exist. And it's going to give me some like autocomplete nonsense about maybe you meant any or alphanumeric. Okay. But what I can actually do is if I then type imports, and then I can import this other scope that I've defined, this stuff all resolves now. And so like both from within TypeScript's type system, and when you actually do this validation at runtime, you can actually see that, now subscope, well, let's also compile it. And then you'll see that like this other scope, if you look at C, we'll just infer it. Because if we wanted to, reuse the type or something like that, this would be the way that you extract that. Oops, why is it telling me that doesn't exist? That's the same thing, right? I definitely wrote the same thing.
It
That's a
is.
weird one. All right, well, let's not worry about whatever nonsense VS Code was
That's all
doing
right.
there. But basically, if you actually look at the way that it's inferred, you'll see it's like A is a string and B is some key Boolean, and it's an array of that because that's how I wrote it in this like updated scope. So basically, it's like this whole module system. You can define any kind of like interreferential types and recursive types and cyclic types, and it's very, very scalable. So I'm super excited to be sharing it, and hopefully I didn't go on too long about some of this nonsense. But
No, while you were going on about it, people said like, "Nice job." Someone said, "Wait, you guys got the pipe operator?" That person, I believe they work with Astro, or at least they contribute to it. Someone else,
yeah,
I've seen another one that said, "Whoa, this should be submitted as a perf test to the TypeScript team. Amazing work, David."
oh, well, thank you. I definitely really appreciate it. So yeah, I can kind of show briefly, there's this concept of morphs, which is like you have a certain input and then you get a certain output. So we tried really hard to like make that concept understandable for people. So like, let's say I'm going to write a morph called parse string length. And so we'll define this. Oh, could I actually import type? Not yet. Okay, did that do it? Okay. Hopefully that actually, it's just telling me maybe that I didn't write anything yet. Okay, great. So basically I could say it's a string, and yeah, you can use this pipe operator if you want. There's also like a morph helper function that does the same thing if you don't like operators or you don't know what pipes are or whatever. And then you could say, okay, well, I want to take the string as input, and then what I want to return is the length of the string. And so then what you'll see represented here is it's a type with an input type of string and an output of number. And so basically, you can do any kind of like arbitrary transformations like that. You can chain them together. You can do arbitrary narrowing. So like, let's say that I wanted to say it's a string, and this is called a narrowing function. And I would say like the string length has to be 5. That wouldn't really be something you could represent actually in TypeScript. So I'll pick something different. Let's say that the string had to be foo. And then I could write something like S is foo, just like you do in TypeScript. Oops, well, that's not how you write TypeScript, but like this is how you write TypeScript.
Yeah.
And then if you look at this, it will actually say it's foo, because what it means is like it was a string initially. I checked it was a string, and then I passed it to your function, and that narrowed it so that the final type was foo. So it's got a lot of features. I think the biggest problem right now is I'm like a little bit behind on documenting all of them. So I'm working very hard to try to get caught up on that. But in the meantime, I just added support for that autocomplete stuff that maybe you guys saw earlier, so that when you start typing, you can actually see this like list of all of the available keywords, including the keywords that are in your scope like this. So that is a nice way to like sort of build an intuition about what's available at any given point in time and what you can use. You can see we have these like parsed dates and parsed integers and all these nice convenient types. So yeah, really exciting stuff.
Exciting. Oh my gosh. And someone had a question that I thought was interesting. They said and you might have already probably showed this. They said, I always have an issue making one type depend on another. For example, oh yes, and you saw the comment that someone wanted it a little bit bigger. Making one type depend on another. For example, if something is multi equals true, then make options equals an array of strings, otherwise options equal strings. How would Arktype handle this? I hope I didn't read this really bad. I'm sorry.
I'm trying to parse it right now. Let me see. Is multi if it's something make option. I don't know. So it kind of sounds like this would be something that would be like a TypeScript generic function, maybe, where you'd like pass in a generic parameter like is multi, and then based on that, you would like narrow down the type of what options would be. But Arktype does not deal with functions. So the idea is like validating data. So basically anything that represents like static data or even those like morphs, are things that are built into Arktype, but like it wouldn't be for defining like a generic function that takes in some options and narrows them. So whatever struggles you're having with TypeScript there, maybe reach out to me directly. I might be able to help. I have written a lot of generic functions, but it wouldn't be something that you could, that Arktype would be designed to do directly.
Gotcha. Okay, sorry about that one.
No problem.
Which someone was asking, like, what other languages does it support, if any?
So none. I mean, it's for TypeScript and JavaScript right now. I know I meant maybe you were around at the beginning of the stream. I mentioned like one of the really cool things about this is you can see this syntax is basically just JSON, so you could serialize it and you could use it from other languages. And that's true, but it's just, it's me, and I've had another developer helping out for several months on the project. So we've definitely got our hands full with like TypeScript and JavaScript, and we know there's a lot of really great validators out there already in the ecosystem. So we're kind of focused on like making sure that we're actually adding value to you guys in that ecosystem first. And then once we really nail that down and all this stuff kind of congeals into something that people really love to use within TypeScript, then at that point, we'll start to think about, how can we make this available in Python or Rust or whatever else.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, and I figured some people did come in a little bit late, or they're still trying to catch up to what this project is. And yeah, I agree. It would be a lot to be supporting all these different languages. On that note, then I know you said it's you and another person contributing. If people were interested, how could they contribute?
Would love to have more contributors. We've had a few recently. I kind of like initially announced the project publicly about a month ago, and so at that point we definitely got some initial interest and a few people making some contributions, which is awesome. But we'd love to like have the community contributing and giving us feedback on a larger scale. So we have a guide written up about that, and this little section in our README. So I think you have a link to the GitHub there, which is up, which is great. And so, here it is, right? So if you look at this section here for contributions, there's a little summary of it. Talks about creating an issue, and there's this guide here that will tell you like how to clone the repo and just kind of walk you through the whole process of getting started and making a pull request and some of the nuances of working with a repo like this that has some types in it that might be a little bit unfamiliar if you haven't done a bunch of crazy TypeScript stuff. But we try to kind of walk through, here's how we try to approach some of these problems. We like to maintain this parallel between our runtime code and our static analysis. or the static types that are created basically based on that input. So hopefully this will be a good guide. But if you have any questions, definitely reach out to me directly. We have a Discord that's been a really nice place for people to communicate about this stuff. So would definitely recommend joining there and reaching
Yeah,
out to me. I can help out with questions you have about Arktype, or especially if you're interested in contributing, that'd be amazing. And I'd love to help however I can.
yes. And then your Discord, I know you put the link here, but I feel like it'll be hard for people to copy because I can't actually paste it in the comments. It's listed on your website, right? If people
Yes.
want it. Okay, great. Awesome. And I
So it's
saw,
it's
oh,
here.
go ahead. Or it's
Yeah, so if
also on
people
there.
just go to the GitHub,
Yeah.
yeah, you can click the link here. I think there's a few links to it like throughout all the documentation. Yeah, see, here's another one. So if you go to the GitHub page in the README, should be able to get there from there. I'll look at where else there might be one on the website directly as well. But for now, let's just stick with, if you go to the GitHub README, get to the Discord from there.
Perfect. And then I did see you get a Discord notification, two of them about stars. So
Yes.
also another way if people are like, I want to contribute, but not really sure how to start. I mean, or like might feel like a little bit overwhelmed. The small, easy way to contribute is starting the project and then using it
Definitely.
as well and giving some feedback. So go ahead and start trying it out as well. Someone said they're joining the Discord right away. This looks good. And someone said paging Matt. Oh my gosh, I had Matt on a Twitch stream showing us TypeScript a while back. It would be awesome to connect.
Yeah, I've been in touch with him a little bit.
Oh,
He's
Matt,
awesome.
awesome.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to just be sharing it throughout the community. Yeah, Matt's such a great communicator and understands TypeScript so well. I definitely envy his sort of like just general connection with the community and general understanding about how to communicate about complex topics really clearly. I tend to ramble on a lot and be less clear. So something to aspire
No.
to.
No, everybody has their own communication style. I think yours was really helpful. Okay, I'm going to switch into some other questions, less about archetype and some about like maybe your journey as well. So just gonna stop the screen share for a little bit. But folks are oh, and someone said, Matt had the advantage of being a teacher before, I guess. So
Yeah, it's true.
yeah.
It's totally unfair. I'm pretty sure he was actually like a voice coach too. So what am I even supposed to
Wow.
do?
Yeah,
And he has a British accent, which everyone knows is superior to an American accent. So I really just
right.
have no advantages. It's not fair. Uh,
Oh man. Okay. Tell us about I love like that you're so embedded into open source. You sound like you've been making more than one project in the past. What are some challenges that you've encountered as an open source maintainer?
yeah. I mean, I think that obviously there's this sort of like core, conflict between I want to like have, a steady source of income and also to like be doing the things that are optimal for the open source community.
Yeah.
Certainly like with a tool like this, I feel like it has so much potential because when I was at Amazon last,
Yeah.
I was building tools for other developers. I was in SDET and like I was kind of doing something similar. I'd go around at Amazon and pitch people on my tools and say like, you should use this. It will really help your team. But so now I'm kind of doing the same thing, but my scope is much bigger because like anyone can use it. Doesn't have to be at Amazon, but also not getting a paycheck. So like, there's kind of that like conflict between wanting to do the most general thing that's best for the most users, but also making it financially sustainable. So I'm working on that stuff,
Yeah.
trying to figure out, sponsors and trying to figure out, how opportunities for VC funding and things like that. So if you know anyone, feel free to send them my way. I'd love to talk to them. But yeah, that's a big challenge. I think from like a more personal level, I'm like a super obsessive person. This project was like by far the thing. I mean, I've been always a passionate person, but like, man, was I like when I was working on this, I was like, I can build a type system. Like this is like an amazing thing to work on.
Yeah.
And I was probably working like 90 hours a week for the last year and a half. And like, I just like so obsessed and just so excited. But if you kind of just got like too caught up in that and you're not attending to, like, oh, how have I been feeling like when I wake up in the mornings? And like, do I really have the same like energy level that I had like last week or whatever it is? It can be exhausting. And one of the biggest things that I've really found is actually connecting with users and, doing things like this, getting feedback from people, like sharing your work is really, really crucial. Even if it feels like there's like something big that you want to do and you have these like long-term sort of like ambitious goals, like my biggest recommendation would be to like share it along the way, and just always be, as much as you can, just like finding excuses to communicate about it and talk to people about it. Because like for me at least, like that's what really fuels my excitement and like reignites it when I'm like feeling bogged down by some, I'm on like 130 commits on some branch now, but like there was actually one branch a few months ago that I didn't want to ever talk about again. But I think it was like 1,300 commits, and it was absurd. It was just like a total rewrite of the whole repository, and like you just get bogged down by stuff like that, and it can just be exhausting if you're not like having a team and like having users of people you can interact with for that energy. So the biggest thing I think is the community, and just making sure that you're using that to stay energized.
Yeah, okay. First off, I mean I'm not an open source maintainer, but I definitely relate with you and understand like open source is hard to make it financially sustainable, and it can be easy to burn out. And I am similar to you in that like I'll just like keep coding or keep working and not like really check in to like how am I doing? How am I feeling? I think that's why I like developer advocacy over software engineering, is that like what you were saying about getting that feedback. I build something or I write something and then I put it out into the world, and then people are like, I like this, or can you
Yeah.
improve this? Whereas as a software engineer,
It's
I
actually
put it
been
out and I'm like,
so amazing. Yeah, to like, I mean, because I worked on this so much, mostly like in isolation,
yeah.
and like literally in isolation because of COVID and everything also. But like, figuratively, also, like when I did initially release it, and like people just really seemed interested. And the nicest thing is like since then, a lot of people like really went super deep, because again, I'm kind of behind in the documentation. Like there's a lot of stuff that you kind of have to like discover a little bit now. We're working on publishing new docs, but like people have got back to me with these like super crazy scenarios. They're like doing this like really deep stuff with it, and they're like imagining new ways to use Arktype that I didn't even conceive of. And like that's so exciting to just like see people kind of like take it and like run with it and find new things to do with it. And so that's just been incredibly rewarding for me. Like whenever you really like pour your heart into something, and then you have an opportunity to like see other people like really running with it and like finding new ways to use it, and just going so deep so they sort of like understand what went into making it. It's just like an incredibly rewarding experience. So the more you can seek those opportunities out, the better. And I would also say, like, I know it's kind of daunting. This project is crazy and it was a lot of work for sure. But I would say like you don't need to build something like this to like to like share something of value to the community. There's actually lots of tools that are really small. I mean, like Cindersource or someone comes to mind where they like to build really small utilities that are super useful, that have been used, downloaded, millions and millions of times, and are used like all around the world, that like solve a really, a really common problem in like a really elegant way. Like, you can build something like that, and just, I would always like focus on, coming up with the right solution, and just limit the scope of the problem until like you really feel great about like what you've done. And like you're like, yes, like I understand this whole problem, I'm not adding any like extra bells and whistles, like this is basically the ideal solution to this problem. And it can just be something really simple, but you can focus on sharing that. And I think that's actually probably a great approach, because from there you can start to engage with the community and sort of like scale up perhaps the scope of what you've built alongside that kind of community interaction and feedback. And whenever you have a chance to do that, I do think that it adds so much.
I love it. So exciting. I want to address a couple of comments. Dan came in and said, "Hi, is this Zod?" Just like other people asked. I know if Fuzzy Bear was asking that too. No, it's not. Like someone else mentioned, it's a slightly simpler approach, because you don't need to like do any chaining or really understand the API there. Someone was asking, and I'm really interested in this. Is there going to be some way to fund your project? Do you have a GitHub sponsors or open collective that can tell people to go check out?
Yeah. So there is a GitHub sponsor. So if you go to the GitHub page, you'll see that. And of course, it's very meaningful to us if you sponsor the project. I think it just is. I mean, it's nice to like have a little bit of income, but honestly, it also just shows like an appreciation that I feel like it is really meaningful. Obviously, don't feel obligated to do that. I know a lot of you probably seeing it for the first time. Like, use it. If it's like adding a lot of value, then that's something that we'd really appreciate. But obviously, it's not required. But yeah, actually, I think one really promising things. I don't know if you've heard of Pydantic. It's kind of the like de facto standard for doing validation in the Python ecosystem. They actually had a library just like this, like an open source library that's been around for several years, and just founded like a company and got venture capital backing from Sequoia. They got $5 million to like turn this into like a cloud infrastructure tooling and things like that, like all based on their validation, all based on their open source Python validator. So I do think there's real potential. JavaScript ecosystem also really big, probably even a little bit bigger than Python's. And this tooling, so it not only is it like not Zod syntax, but like no, it's not based on, doesn't use Zod under the hood or anything like that. It doesn't have any dependencies. And actually, like under the hood, it's like a full type system. So it's not just like a validator. Basically, like when you do intersections and do unions and things like that, it can actually compute like what the most optimal way to represent those things is. It knows when like a type is unsatisfiable. It knows if one type is assignable to another type. So it can do lots of things that like any other validator can't do, because it kind of has this like very different sort of like architecture. And it's, if you want to compare it to anything, it was really it was meant to be like the runtime version of TypeScript. So it like does a lot of things that TypeScript does. It's not so much to be like, I'm going to build another Zod or something like that.
Gotcha. I'm glad for that clarity too, especially for folks that made it come in later. I think you kind of touched on this, but I thought it was a good question. Someone was just asking how do you start getting feedback? That I think that's been a hard thing for them on whatever open source project they may have. And you talked about like, putting it out there, like putting the project out there through blog posts and like Twitch streaming and stuff like that. I think that's part of how you can start getting feedback. Any other additional tips?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like Discord has been a great source of interactions for me. I think it is kind of hard to like get the first few people in there.
Yeah.
So I think right now we have like 40 or something like that. But definitely like once you start kind of like growing that community of people who are really invested in your tooling, like man, there are definitely people who like will give you really specific feedback and have really specific questions and really like to go deep on some of this stuff, which is really great. Obviously, you have to moderate it a little bit with some of your time expenditure and things like that, but like it's definitely great to be engaging in that way. I honestly think that like, so it kind of like when I first posted it on Reddit, like the JavaScript subreddit and the TypeScript subreddit, I think those posts got like a decent amount of attention, and then people posted it on Twitter, and it just kind of got like, I think a lot of people became interested in it at that point. And one really good sign is that it's kind of like sustained this like natural growth since then, where I really only posted it like once about a month ago, and I think I got like 400 stars or something. And then from there, like we're almost at 1,000 now. I haven't been like really like posting it directly like that, or like I comment about it and sort of like talk about it when I can, but people have just like continued to use it and spread it and stuff like that. So I think that's a really good sign. I think it is really hard. I would maybe start by like reaching out to friends and like the developer community and asking them for feedback, and asking them to share it with their friends. Like that's probably a really good way to get started. But unfortunately, because it's not always what we want to do as developers, but there is definitely like a marketing aspect to sort of like getting tools like this to grow. So you kind of have to think about like, what is the feedback I'm getting? Like when I do post it on Reddit or Hacker News or whatever, like what do people say? What are they confused about? What's clear? And you kind of have to like iterate a little bit about your messaging. And then eventually you'll hopefully find something that kind of clicks with people. And then you'll sort of have that like natural engagement. I guess it's product market fit if you're like a startup person. But
Yeah, yeah. And Dan said, just be really loud on Twitter like me. No, everything you just said is something that like I try to tell developers. Like, yes, marketing feels cringy sometimes, but you can do authentic marketing. And it's not like, oh, you have to try out my project. It's like, hey, I'm currently working on Arktype right now. Like, oh, I got this challenge of doing such and such. Oh, but I was able to solve it, and maybe writing a blog post about how you solved it, or
yeah,
or doing a Twitch stream. Like that type of stuff helps people get engaged and be like, oh, what are you doing over there? Or even like just you showing up on Open Source Friday. That's
yeah.
an element of that. Um, this is really great. I have a, I guess, selfish question on the GitHub side, or is like, what GitHub products and tooling have you leveraged to build Archetype?
Yeah. So definitely I'm a huge GitHub fan, and I love the extent to which like they've made so many aspects of the development process like really directly integrated with their Git tooling, and especially like sort of like config like code is config, right? The idea of like, for
Yeah.
example, that um I can define my GitHub actions in such a way where I have this set up to make sure that my repository is in a good state where I can run all the tests across different versions, and then basically there's this like forked process that was so easy to set up because I'm like maybe the only thing I like dislike more than doing like UI work that I'm terrible at is doing like DevOps work, which I'm even worse at and just have even less patience for. But like this was so easy to work with, and yeah, I got this I have this like setup where it'll basically run initially on like a default Ubuntu and like node setup, but then it can run across like a matrix really easily of different of Mac OS and Windows, and previous versions of Node. And we actually even have some built-in tooling which makes it run across different versions of TypeScript. Right now we support 4.8 to 5.0, so we'll like run all the tests, validate all the types, and then rerun them across 4.9 and 4.8. And GitHub definitely makes all that stuff so much easier. Actions has been a really really nice way to just make sure that anytime we're merging pull requests, that we get lots of assurance that like we're not breaking things. You still have to have good tests, so write good tests. But like other than that, GitHub really helps to like facilitate actually running them across platforms and making sure that you get all that feedback directly. So it's been awesome.
Yeah, I love that you're using it as like double assurance that you're like, yeah, we
Yeah.
wrote the test, but also let's just double check. And
Yes.
GitHub Actions, I love like that's like the thing that made me excited about GitHub. Like at first I was like, oh, okay, I just put my code on here, but I was like, GitHub Actions, this is cool. Um, this is thank you so much for showing us that. I want to switch into some of our like non-technical questions just for fun. And before that, I do want to say like quickly happy birthday to learner 0418. They literally watch the stream every Friday. And I like it doesn't matter. Like there's other people that come in and out, but they're always here. So I just do want to recognize it and be like happy birthday to them. Thank you for
That's
always
awesome. Happy
tuning in.
birthday. I
Yeah.
love all the powers of two in the suffix of your name. I'm a big powers of two fan. So, there you go.
Oh my god, I didn't even notice that. Cool. And then all right, so my first non-technical question to you is what was the first programming language that you learned?
Oh man. So okay, I did do a little bit of C++ in school. I actually dropped out of college because I was like, I like learning on my own, and I'm like very self-motivated and would rather teach myself to code. So I was doing a little bit of C++, but I was like, this is boring. I just want to like get a job somewhere and build something real. And so this is gonna sound bad, but actually, I got a job at this kind of not the best company, but it was like a way to into software, and I was like writing Visual Basic for applications. Like I literally wrote like Excel scripts. Like there was, not like formulas or whatever. It was like a kind
Yeah.
of language, but that was like my intro to coding was like use this crazy, terrible language that's in Excel or whatever. But it's all about iteration, right? It's just like you start and then just seeing like, okay, what principles work for designing code that's maintainable and stuff like that. And so it was a good enough language for me to get some intro to that. And then from there, I've done a lot of other stuff since then. But it was a pretty janky start, I would say.
Yeah, no, I can relate a little bit. When I was in community college, they made me do like a Visual Basic 1 and 2 class, and like I
Yeah,
still didn't really know what programming was then. So I was like, "What is this? I'm so confused." So yeah. um.
yeah.
Oh wait, someone else had a question that I think might be better than than my own. Where'd you get the fit, like the bow tie action?
Yeah. So this was actually a gift. I don't know if she's in the stream, but my sister actually gave me this bow tie.
Oh,
I think it's like based on a real circuit board somewhere, something like that. But I sometimes wear it if I'm doing like fun coding stuff. I'm a big bow tie enthusiast. I think I own like 100 bow ties or something. And yeah, I feel like the knot went well today. I haven't been tying them as much during COVID, but it's like pretty clean. So I feel good about that. I don't know off the top of my head like where you could get one, but if you're really into it, then maybe I can refer you to my sister and she can let you know where she got it.
yeah, you tied it pretty good. I thought maybe you like clipped it on, but and it was
Yeah, that's what. See, it's like the core problem of like being really good at tying bow ties is people think they're fake. So you have to like make it realistic, you know. You gotta like mess it up a little bit or something so people know it's actually real.
Dad's really excited for me to ask the Beyonce question. I'll get to it soon.
Okay.
And I realize I'm over time. So sorry. I'll go a little bit faster then. If money wasn't an issue, how would you ideally spend your time? Like job wise
Yeah.
or job wise?
I would be doing this. I mean, unfortunately, money is an issue. That's why I'm trying to raise money. But like, but I've been so passionate about this, and it's just brought me like so much joy to work on like understanding type theory and like building out this whole system that I just am just. It really has been like this is what I want to do. And I think there's another question about like what would be your ideal open source project to work on.
Yeah.
Like I am working on the thing that I've been the most excited about of anything I've ever worked on, and I'm just so passionate about it. So I really feel like blessed to have even like had this opportunity to build this. And yeah, we will see what happens with all this VC funding stuff and everything. But a lot of early signs are promising. So like, you know, I'm pretty optimistic that we're going to be able to, you know, make this work in the long term.
Yay, crossing my fingers for you. I'm really excited for you. What? For you. Sorry, my brain.
Hopefully for everyone, you know, better validation makes the world better. So
yeah. So if you could eat one food for the rest of your life.
I pretty much do, because like I'm just one of those people who just like eats whatever's in front of them, sort of. And I'm not like, yeah, I mean, so my wife is like an amazing vegan cook, and it's like literally her job. And so she's super, super talented and like makes all this awesome stuff that I like basically benefit from because she needs someone to feed it to. So that's really great. But like I know that like when she goes on vacation or something like that, like I will literally just eat PB Fit, which is like this peanut butter protein like mix, like with granola, like and cereal. And it's like I'll just eat that for like every meal because it's like really easy and it's relatively healthy and I just don't have to think about it, so that I can just like devote all my energy like one of those like, you know, whatever, like the like Soylent Green or whatever, just like all like I'm just gonna be optimally efficient. I eat other stuff, but honestly I do kind of eat the same stuff a lot, and my favorite thing is probably the peanut butter protein cereal.
Nice. No, good. Okay, good choice in marrying a cook. Oh,
I know that really does help. Yeah,
I wish I did that.
It's awesome, and she does her own like Instagram and everything, and like every day to be served like these gourmet meals that like look like they're just from some 3-star Michelin restaurant or whatever. It's pretty great.
That's amazing. Okay.
Oh wait, okay. I just want to comment really quickly on to the person who said that the 11th Doctor said bow ties are cool. And Matt Smith was actually my original inspiration for starting to wear bow ties. Like I've done this basically my whole adult life, but like he was the reason why I was like obsessed with Matt Smith, and I thought bow ties were cool. So just wanted to call that out. That's actually where this all came from. So it was just funny to see it there.
Thanks for calling that out. I didn't know who 11th Doctor was, so I was like, hello. Okay. Second to last question. How do you pronounce the word GIF? Do you say GIF or GIF?
So I say GIF, I guess. I think that is probably the like basic boring answer, but I buy the whole argument about, graphics starts with a hard G, and whatever the original creator said, I feel like that's less important than like the objective truth of the universe and like logic. So, if one of you guys starts using Arktype and you're like, actually the paradigm you should be using is this, like don't define the types the way that David does, he's actually wrong. Like, you know what, if you actually have a clear case for why that's true, then like just because I wrote the thing originally does not give me ultimate authority over it for its entire life. So I buy the argument about like, it just makes more sense if it's a hard G. So GIF.
Okay, I like that perspective. And then the most important question that it seems everybody is waiting for, but no pressure. What's your favorite Beyonce song? And if not Beyonce, what's your favorite song?
Yeah, I think it's probably Crazy in Love. I was thinking about it a little bit, and like the first thing that popped in my head was Single Ladies, but then I thought about like I have a lot of memories about Crazy in Love, and I always think about my wife, and so that's always like a nice aspect of it. Whereas like Single Ladies, I can't relate as much to like the perspective of being a single lady because I'm a man and not single. So yeah, so I feel like the other one resonates with me a little bit more. Weird random anecdote is that during that song, like in the recording, because I listened to it on headphones like this, there's like this one point at which like there's kind of this background sound that kind of sounds like David. It's not actually that, But like it's just like it's some weird thing where whenever I hear that song, like I have to like take off my headphones and like look if my wife is trying to call me, because I actually, something in the song like sounds like they're like saying the word David like in the background. It's very bizarre, but I love that song, and yeah, definitely lots of good memories associated with it. So that would be my number one.
Love that choice. As a kid, I spent a lot of time with my friends dancing to that song, like putting
Yeah,
the music video on and being like, I could dance like Beyonce. But thank you so much. This was really fun.
yeah,
Y'all go ahead and check out archetype.io for the website. They also have github.com/archetype.io/archetype if you wanted to contribute, if you wanted to start the project, if you wanted to try the project out, and if you wanted to join the Discord. And also if you wanted to make a little bit of a financial contribution, because David has been putting his heart and soul into this project, you can go ahead and check out the sponsors page here. And then, is there anything else that I'm missing that you want me to highlight? Maybe the Twitter or something?
oh yeah, you can check out the Twitter. Like I have a Twitter account where I mostly post about Arktype, and then I think I sent you the one that's like the Arktype Twitter account. We
Yeah.
just actually announced like a new release a few hours ago that like kind of some of the autocomplete functionality that you saw there was new. So would be excited to, you know, you keep an eye on that for announcements, and we'll be excited to get your all your feedback on how that feels to use. I feel like initially I was sort of this like purist kind of, hey, like, you know, you already get this like really specific error message if there's anything wrong, like why you need autocomplete. But like realistically, then I like added it and I'm like, this is way better. This is like the best thing in the world. You should definitely have autocomplete. It's so good for discoverability because like if someone starts typing and then they can see like, oh, here's all the built-in keywords, that's kind of amazing. And it like takes a little bit of pressure off me to like finish the documentation as fast because people have some idea what they can use. So would
Yeah.
love to, you know, see what you guys all think about that. Mess around with it, try it. It will be fun. Try to break it because like I think people like doing that, and you know, it's pretty hard to break. I'll like challenge you to break it because it's not very many bugs, and I think that they're like pretty deep. A few people have found one, but if you can find a new one, I'll be very impressed. So, you know, try it out, go for it, and like let me know what you find.
Heck yeah. Find those bugs, y'all, and try out the autocomplete. I do think that's pretty cool. I think this is a great note to end on. Thank you for your time and your passion, and
Thank you
for
for having
your
me.
contributions to open source.
I
All right.
really miss like this kind of thing, just getting to engage with the community, and you've been awesome, and I just really appreciate the opportunity so much.
Awesome. Yes, I appreciated it too. And thank you to the audience. I always got to say thanks to y'all. Y'all are always engaged, always tuned in. I just love that it's not like we're just talking to ourselves. All
Yeah,
right,
it's so cool
y'all.
to see all the questions from so many different platforms at the
I
same time.
know. I love StreamYard for that. All right, y'all. Have a great Friday. Bye.